Hello everyone, my name is Ajay Poddar. I'm part of Informatica GCS team. As a part of today's presentation, we are going to see how to use Databricks Job Cluster using Create Cluster Tasks in DEI or in BDM product. As a part of today's presentation, we will be discussing on this agenda, ephemeral cluster overview, how to use Databricks Job Cluster using Create Cluster Task, and demo. So let's try to understand on ephemeral cluster. A ephemeral cluster is a cloud platform cluster that you can create to run a mapping and other tasks and then terminate when the tasks are completed. It is mainly used to save the cloud platform resources. For creating the Databricks job cluster using a create cluster task, you need to create a workflow where you need to drag and drop the create cluster task from the workflow, and in this create cluster task there will be the option in advanced section under the properties tab where you need to check the job cluster from the general option. This will create a job cluster for each mapping and delete the after the job gets succeeded. Now let's see on demo how to use Databricks job cluster using create cluster task. First you need to log into Informatica admin console and create a Databricks cloud provisioning connection. So for that, click on manage connection, click on action, new connection, Databricks cloud provisioning. Here you need to update the name, Databricks domain name, and the Databricks token ID. So these two details you need to get it from your Azure admin or the Databricks admin. I have already created the cloud provisioning connection with Databricks 9.1, and I'll be using the same connection for creating the Databricks job cluster using create cluster task. Now let's go to developer tool, create a project and create a workflow. Here in this panel you will see the option create cluster tasks. You need to select it and drag and drop in the mapping canvas. So once you click here, you need to create a pipeline from start event to the create cluster task, and in this create cluster tasks there is an option for the connection name and the connection type. So currently I am creating the Databricks job cluster, so using the Azure Databricks. So I'm selecting Azure Databricks. You can select the AWS as well if you are having the AWS Databricks. Now update the connection name, browse, and here you need to update the connection name which you have created from the admin console, that is Databricks cloud provisioning connection. Select the connection. Okay, now click on advanced mode. Here you will see the option in the general option, that is job cluster. So for creating the job cluster you need to check this box and save it. Now the create cluster tasks for creating the job cluster is configured. You can add the mapping after this create cluster task where the mapping will utilize the job cluster. I have already created a simple workflow where I have created the create cluster task using Azure Databricks and selected the job cluster option. Here I am using the two mapping and mapping 2. So these are the Databricks mapping. Let's open the mapping. Here you will see it is reading and writing from Databricks table to Databricks table. So in runtime I have selected the engine as a Databricks, and the connection for this it will be the auto deploy. And similarly for the other mapping, it's the runtime environment Databricks, and connection here will be auto deploy. And connect the mapping to the end event, and this is the complete workflow where the Databricks job cluster will be created and will be utilized by the each mapping. So for each mapping there will be a particular job cluster will be created. Now let's try to run this workflow as an application. So for this you need to create an application from this workflow. For that, right click on workflow and click on deploy. I have already deployed the application with the name application underscore workflow underscore job cluster. Now let's try to run this application from the admin console. For that, go to admin console, click on manage services and nodes, and select the DAS where the application has been deployed. And now click on application, and you will see the application which you have deployed. So for me it is application workflow underscore job cluster, where you need to expand this workflow job cluster, and here you will see the green icon to start the workflow. Click on this icon, and if you have any parameter file configure for the workflow, you can update here, or else you can click on OK, which will start the workflow. Now let's try to monitor this workflow from the monitoring tab. Click on execution stats, select the DIS and the workflow, and expand this application. Here you will see the workflow. So here you can see now my workflow is started, where the create cluster task is completed, and now mapping is in the execution states. I have already executed this workflow, which was successful. Here you can see the mapping, and mapping 2 was started. Here let's try to see the mapping. Expand this mapping task and mapping. Here you will see the infra Databricks, and here you can see the run URL for the job cluster, and for the job cluster the ID is 1110784. Now let's try to monitor from the Databricks. Here you can see here you can see 1110784, which was the job cluster created for that particular mapping and got terminated. And now currently the job cluster is in the running state for my latest mapping, which I have triggered, this one. And here you can see the job cluster ID is 1111010, and same thing you will be able to see from here, 1111010. So this is how the job cluster is created and get terminated for running the mappings from Informatica. Please refer this documentation if you need additional information on Databricks job cluster using create cluster task. We would love to hear from you. You can send us a mail to supportvideos@informatica.com or tweet us on https://twitter.com/infasupport. Thank you.